Hi, everyone. Welcome back. Today, we're going to talk about the 4% rule. In my opinion, this is a must know for your kids so that they can secure their financial future. Why? I think if you put this concept in their head early on, they'll always remember it. And if they remember it, they'll start saving early and they'll be able to secure that financial future that we're talking about. So, why do kids need to learn? How many times have I heard a parent say this? I wish I had learned this earlier. Okay, yeah. So, why don't we just make sure that our kids do learn it early? You see, kids need to understand that money isn't just for spending, it's also about building security, which I get is hard. The younger the kid, they're not really focused on building security. But I think if you begin to talk about it, they'll then begin to think about it more and it will become part of their thought process later in life. Knowing this concept early is going to equal, no matter what, better financial choices later in life. So here's the 4% rule if you don't remember. It's a general rule for withdrawing money from savings in retirement. Remember, it goes something like this. Let's say you saved, I don't know, $1 million. You can withdraw 4% in the first year or 4%. Then every year thereafter, you can continue to withdraw that 4%, increasing by inflation. So that is to say, if inflation is 3%, you took out 40 the first year, now you're taking out about 41,000 the second year. And the concept is that that money would last you approximately 30 years without running out. That's in a nutshell what the 4% rule is. Now, there is a little bit of a disclaimer here because experts are arguing constantly over what the right number is. Some are saying it's the 3.5% rule. Others are saying it's the 4.5% rule, depending on market conditions. So, for our purposes, let's just keep it simple and get the concept in their heads and just use the 4%. Now, the other thing is that it's based on studies using a 60-40 portfolio. What does that mean? It means 60% in equities, 40% in fixed income or bonds. And now, there are a lot of experts out there that are saying portfolios aren't 60-40 anymore. That's not optimizing it. There are alternative asset classes. Again, don't overcomplicate this. You're just trying to give your kids a visual of what they're going to use to inspire them to save money in the future. So here's how I would start off the conversation with the kids. I would just ask them, how much do you think it costs to run our household? Then, depending on whether you feel comfortable sharing or not, you can then back into, okay, if it cost us 40,000 per year to run the household, in order to have a secure retirement for 30 years, we'd need to have $1 million because $1 million at 4% would throw off $40,000. Get it? Or if you wanted to take it a step further, if your living expenses were 80,000 per year, you don't need to be a math major to figure out that's just 2 million that you would need saved. So what you could then do is if you're willing to share with them how much it costs to run the household, you could ask them, how much do you think that we need to save in order to have a secure financial future on the spending path that we're on today? What you're trying to do is you're trying to help kids connect savings to real life expenses. So they see that building wealth early is so important. So that leads to the question, how do you get to $1 million in savings? Well, what I like to do is to say, well, if you saved, let's say 10,000 per year for 40 years, you're only going to have $400,000, not $1 million, right? But then you could talk about compound interest and investing. And then you could move into, well, what happens if you saved, I don't know, let's say 500 per month? That's 6,000 a year. And let's say you get 7%. That would be $1 million in 35 years. And if you want to add in a little wrinkle for them to think about, you could say, well, what if you started saving earlier? Let's say you started saving at 20, you would only need to save 200 per month to hit $1 million by retirement. Do you get where I'm going with this? You're teaching kids that starting early and investing wisely, the combination of those two is going to lead to financial freedom going forward. Here's how you can teach this to your kids. You can, for example, give them a pretend $100,000 and ask them, how much can you safely spend yearly from this, given the 4% rule? They're going to say $4,000. Now take a step back and relate it to their allowance. You could say, well, let's say you saved $100 from your allowance. How much could you spend per year for 30 years? That would be $4. And I like to compare this to growing a tree. You got to plant small seeds, which are the savings today, to grow into financial security tomorrow. The aha moment that you want them to have is that if they want to have $100,000 a year in retirement income, they're going to need to save $2.5 million. What this is going to do is it's going to encourage them saving early. The small habits now have the massive impact later on. It's also going to teach responsibility. They'll see money as a tool, not just as something to spend. And then you're encouraging action as a parent. Talk to them about the 4% rule in simple terms. Show them real life examples. How about some charts or calculators? Maybe even use Monopoly money and help them start their savings, whether in a bank, investment account, or tracking their own money. Here are the takeaways. The message, the 4% rule, isn't just about retirement, it's about freedom. You want them to start the conversation today so that your kids have this financial confidence later in the future. If your child understands this, they are never going to feel lost about financial security and what it's going to take to get there.